Hi, everybody. Today I'm going to talk about innovation. Innovation has become the mot du jour. Everybody talks about it in the private sector, in corporate America, in the public sector, government, health, education, defense, you name it, and even in foreign policy and diplomacy. If you go to Google and you Google innovation, you get 110 million results. You get 6 times as many if you Google government innovation. But what does that mean? Why is innovation so popular on Google? Well, I think it's really hard to try even to define what innovation is, even harder to define what innovation is in government and foreign policy. So even before attempting a definition, I went back to Google for a couple of images to inspire my talk today. And actually what I found was this and this. Well, those are obviously like not representative of what innovation is at all. But if you actually dig deeper and deeper on Google Images, you find very vague and detached images of what really innovation is. And sometimes innovation is put there as part of a very vague process to achieve success. But again, it doesn't work really well in government, I guess. So what is innovation? Is it about technology? Is it about ideas? Well, I believe that in the digital era, when you think about innovation, technology plays a huge part. But technology is not needed sometimes to be innovative. What really is needed is an idea or multiple ideas, sometimes even simple, very innocent, but very powerful ideas. So let me actually take you back to 1988 and a very iconic movie, especially in the US, but in Europe too, with Melanie Griffith, Harrison Ford, Sigourney Weaver. It's a movie that won a couple of Golden Globes, even a Grammy for a song by Carly Simon, a couple of nominations at the Oscars. The movie is Working Girl. It's a pop iconic movie. It's all about climbing the corporate ladder. It's about a girl played by Melanie Griffith, who from being a secretary in a large investment bank gets her first management job in a large corporation. Well, towards the end of the movie, Melanie Griffith's soon-to-be new boss tells her a story that I believe really highlights the power of ideas. And the story goes like this. One day in the Lincoln Tunnel, if you're not familiar with New York, the Lincoln Tunnel is one of the main ways in and out New York City. Traffic comes to a halt, a stop. A large truck gets stuck into the entrance of the Lincoln Tunnel. It cannot move forward, it cannot move backward. Police is lost. The authorities have tried for hours and hours and hours to sort of like extract that huge truck from the tunnel so that traffic can go back to normal. Towards the end of the day, and with no success. Towards the end of the day, a boy sitting in a car with his mom, one of the many cars that got stuck in traffic because of the accident, goes to the police and tells them, well, why don't you remove the air from the tires? And there you go, like a very simple, but very innocent, but very powerful idea that saved the day and helped traffic move forward. Well, how can we do that in government? How can we sort of deflate our tires so that governments can move forward from this to this? Well, let's actually try to define innovation first. And let's go to a dictionary. Merriam-Webster defines innovation as a new idea, device, or method, or the act or process of introducing new ideas, devices, or methods. But if you dig deeper into the definition of innovation, you often find a few factors or elements that sort of like are associated with innovation very often. And one of this is disruption. Being innovative means to be disruptive. It means to do things differently from before. It means to change institutions, to disrupt the system. It means to sort of reform the process so that it becomes a more innovative process and includes new idea into it. Innovators have the really hard and delicate task to nurture ideas and sort of put those ideas into practice, into new solutions to new problems, but often old problems that we are unable to manage. It's about thinking outside of the box, and sometimes for government officials it's a little bit more difficult to think outside of the box. It's about looking into the unknown, and again, for a government, looking into the unknown is not easy. A second element that comes to mind revolves around failures. Well, when you think about innovation as something disruptive that change the system, that change your own institution, then you might run the risk to run into failures. And often you run into failures multiple times, over and over and over again. Well, it's for the innovator, even for the government innovator, to learn from those failures, to understand why they happened, and to move forward. Well, if you then put together disruption and failures, then you understand why for a government it's a little bit more complicated to be innovative than for the private sector. It's when let's say the definition itself of innovation works against innovation itself, because governments cannot be disruptives, they cannot afford failures, or at least in theory. Well, those two negatives, the failures, the disruptions, can become positives. Let's say that government for years have been trying to nurture new ideas and put those ideas into practice and prioritize on new ideas. And they've been doing that by lately forming new partnerships. And those partnerships are with less traditional players, with non-state actors, with hackers like today, or like startups, like social entrepreneurs. It's what Anne-Marie Slaughters, who used to be at the State Department in Washington, calls the Lego world. All those pieces together that interact, that at the end build like something that can be beautiful. So when you think about disruption, when you think about failures, you also have to think about that those elements bring us to something very interesting. The result is very mind-changing at times. Let's think about, for instance, USAID and the iHub. If you don't know those two organizations, go Google them, because they actually changed. They're both based in Kenya, and they actually changed the way foreign policy deals with humanitarian aid and development and disaster relief, for instance. If you think about Google, Google has had an even bigger impact on foreign policy, how governments talk to each other, talk to their citizens. We had Car Built here on the stage before, and is actually a great example at, the new generation of innovators that are not afraid of trying new things on Twitter, online, offline, elsewhere. So when you go back to failures and disruption, there's actually, I think, a third element that comes to mind. And I think sometimes we overthink what innovation is. We think too much about being innovative and not too much on what ideas really are. So we actually put innovation first and ideas second. Well, I think it's important to understand if innovation is really a process or it's really something that it's out there. Well, I think it's easier first to see what innovation is not. And economist Umar Haque puts it really well when he defines non-innovation, or what he calls innovation, innovation that fails to create authentic, meaningful value. Well, in the private sector, that definition works really well. If you think about an investment bank, if you think about the manufacturing industry, the retail industry, value lies into the end user, which is the customer. those people that go buy fashion products, pasta, pizza, or go to restaurants. But in the government environment, in foreign policy even, the end user is different, and it's a different end user, is the citizen. So I think the idea is to focus less on innovation and more on creating a sort of ecosystem where innovation becomes part of it, but where we try to nurture ideas and people that have ideas, even the most simple and innocent ones. It all comes down to us, government officials and non-government officials, championing idea. And it all comes down to us becoming that little boy that by the Lincoln Tunnel on the movie Working Girl, at the end of the day, had one of the simplest of the ideas and, solve the day and, help police moving forward with the traffic and get back to normal. Thank you.